Welcome, listeners, far and wide from Beantown to Stuytown. I'm Eirik Gislason, Associate Broker and Team Leader of the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens, Master Certified Negotiation Expert and Instructor, founder of Archway Partners Coaching, and your host of Shear Line Negotiation Mastery, a podcast bound and determined to reclaim and restore the good name of negotiation and unlock the door to value creation, win-win solutions, and the true power of collaboration and integrative negotiations. Now, Simon Sinek once commented, "Some people focus on the thing they want, while others focus on the things preventing them from getting what they want." Now, in real estate, in negotiation, heck, in life, that's not just a soundbite, that's every day. And I'm sure all of you out there, no matter what you're negotiating, can relate. Two people can look at the exact same deal, the exact same facts, and tell two completely different stories. But it's not just about optimism versus pessimism. It's about how people process information, assign weight to different facts, make assumptions and claims, and yes, how their emotions sometimes overrule their logical reasoning process. And that's why in this episode, we're diving into how to anticipate objections before they're voiced, how to handle them using clear logical reasoning, and how to do it without bulldozing over the emotional side of decision-making, even when our clients' and counterparts' choices run against their own interests and needs. So Jacob Feldman, Jake, I'm thrilled to have you back on the podcast for round two.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Welcome back. Now, your first appearance still holds the title for our most watched episode with over 14,000 views on YouTube alone.
Amazing.
Now, I should probably keep between us that the last episode, my daughters, CC and Sydney, were on the podcast with Negotiate Like a Child, and they crushed it. So let's not start any family feuds here.
Well, first of all, you're keeping it between you and me and all of them.
Yeah, so that's right.
Not,
you
not
know,
super
you all
secret.
watched it.
I have to tell you, though, I'm super jealous. Like, you bringing your kids to work, getting to work with them, getting to involve them in what you're doing, that's awesome.
I knew it was going to be an amazing experience. I couldn't believe how incredibly well prepared they were.
I can totally believe that.
Yeah, they were just fantastic.
They're amazing.
Sydney told this story, which is one of my favorites. I was talking to her about being curious.
Yeah.
She goes, "It's like when I climb a tree and I look at a leaf and I don't know if it's poison ivy or not. So I want to touch it because I'm curious, and I say, "Oh, that's such a great example because we gain knowledge from testing things, testing for understanding." I said, "So did you touch the leaf or not?" She goes, "I don't know. It's not a real story."
So good.
That's awesome.
So good.
Yeah,
Love
good
it.
stuff.
Love
good
it.
stuff.
Love it.
Now I'm wondering when your daughters, but Sarah, your oldest, is going to be on LR Breakdown, dropping some knowledge.
I would love to have her on. It's a great idea. You know, one of the things that I tell my students all the time, there's this well-known sort of approach to pedagogy called the Feynman technique, whereby you master something by teaching it, by trying to sort of adopt an instructional modality. And so one of the things anybody who's ever been on Reddit knows, there's this idea, explain like I'm 5, right? So it's hard with standardized testing to really go that low, but I tell them, find the smartest 12-year-old you've got in your life and try to explain it to them. So this would actually be a great opportunity to bring Sarah on and walk her through and have her walk me through some of the content to see really how fundamental you can break down the ideas. And all right, you've inspired me. I'm doing it.
I love that.
Special episode.
And I feel like that's really a lot of what I got and the listeners got out of that last episode, is to hear the clarity and to understand how to communicate, how they communicate back to you, their understanding of a concept, but how it teaches you to be a better communicator because breaking it down matters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is how you become a great teacher. And honestly, it's how you determine whether or not you want to be a teacher. Because in the end, you can't know that you can teach until you try. There are no markers. There are no identifiers on a resume or a test that you can take to determine that. Yeah. It's a really, really specific skill set that you have to develop over time. And my students ask me, how did you get so good at this stuff? And I said, because of you guys. Yeah. Not you in particular, because you're new to me, but
not you.
Or because, but no, after 25 years of explaining this material to all of these different people with all of their sort of all of the things they bring to the table when they come to the table, if I have 1,000 students, I have to come up with 1,000 ways to explain it.
Yeah.
And that, it broadens your toolbox. You're no longer the carpenter with the hammer. You've got, an amazing and deep toolbox of experiences to draw on so that you can explain these things to the next person, and you develop something new, and you modulate, you come up with the next way to explain the concept. So.
Well, and that leads beautifully into what we're talking about today.
You're welcome.
Because, thank you. And because there are so many applicable, so many applications to what you're talking about. Having that deep toolbox to understand what the best tool is in the moment. And what as I mentioned, we're going to talk today about emotion, about objection and objection handling. And what's fascinating to me about logical reasoning and how it applies to objection handling, which is a huge part of negotiation and sales for those real estate salespeople out there. But objection handling, there's a preparation to it, anticipating what those objections are going to be or might be, which there's a lot of predictability in objections, but then understanding how to use clear logical reasoning to address some of those objections, which, as we'll talk about, could be based in many different things.
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get right into it. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with every agent's favorite subject: objections and objection handling. So, from the standpoint of logical reasoning, why is it that so many negotiators still get caught off guard by objections, which are, as we've talked about, are predictable and common?
So, it's interesting because this is very much the framework that a lot of people take when they come to the LSAT, which, as for those who listened to the last episode, I've been teaching this test for 20 years, and it's where sort of the source of this knowledge comes from. And many of the resources will teach you to start memorizing the common flaws, the common ways that argumentation breaks down. And it's a good idea because you start to develop pattern recognition. And it's the way that many people approach the test. But what happens is that they only get so far, and I'm doing it horizontally, maybe it's vertical, right? You hit a ceiling. And the reason you hit a ceiling is that the patterns only show up so often. And there are many, many situations that don't perfectly fit the pattern. And so if you're only looking for straw man arguments, if you're only looking for ad hominem attacks, if you're only looking for overgeneralizations when thinking about flawed reasoning, then when you have something that doesn't fit the bill, you sort of shrug. So what I tend to tell people is it's fine to know those things. It's certainly good to have it as a shortcut, right? If you want to short circuit the whole thing and say, oh, I see exactly what you're doing, this is the argument you're making, fine.
Yeah.
But the other thing to do is stop thinking about the what if and instead simply connect the dots. Remember, we talked about the principle of charity.
Yes.
So think about their argument from their perspective, connect the dots for them, and be able to say, this person has assumed that because of X, Y is true. And then be able to say, okay, but that also means that this person has overlooked the possibility that just because of X, Y may not be true.
Right.
And if you can frame that if that's your scaffold, right? And you say, okay, this is my framework. Now I know what my path has to do for me. I may not know exactly what their mistake is. I'm going to have to plumb that from the depths of their sort of emotional reaction to whatever's going on. But at least you've got a solid foundation, a solid skeleton to build on. You say, I know what they've overlooked. They've overlooked that in light of this thing, their conclusion may still not be true. And there are infinite possibilities as to why they've gotten there.
Yeah.
So if I drill down too far, if I go all the way down the rabbit hole and start saying, well, what if it's this? And what if it's that? What if it's that? I can do that. And it's good preparation to start thinking about what are the most common versions of it. but you also have to be ready to be flexible and say, they may tell me something I'm not prepared for, but it still serves the purpose because it's part of this sort of flaw set, this flawed reasoning set, which is simply that they've overlooked the fact that there may not be a connection between their facts and their claim.
I love that. And what I get from that is that being present is really important because being able to be flexible requires that in that moment you're hearing them, you're actually taking in what they're saying and not making your own assumption from the moment that they open their mouth.
Yeah.
And I can see that being a huge trap that agents might fall.
Well, on that point, before I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
But this is like,
so I have you here.
Yeah, exactly. So this is therapy 101, right? That you as a great partner, we can talk about this with relationships, but what you're talking about in negotiation is fundamentally a relationship. If you're going to be a good partner in that negotiation, you have to be listening to understand, not listening to respond. Right. And if you're listening to respond, that means you're responding with one of your preset ideas as to how to get what you want, instead of listening to them, listening to what their objection is, understanding it, finding how they've made the connection that they have, and then redirecting them by introducing the thing that they don't know or the thing that you know that they may not, whatever it is that can redirect them toward a different conclusion.
Yeah. And that goes along with the other thought that I had on this is if we do respond, if we're listening to respond, then whether we're present or not, oftentimes what we then do is, instead of leaning in a way that's constructive, leaning into that objection and actually going, you know what, I'm not going to ignore the objection. I'm not going to avoid it, which is what some agents will do, or some people will do, salespeople will do, or whoever's listening to the podcast. We'll avoid the objection because we're afraid that by leaning in, we're somehow going to make it worse, or we're going to make it combative. But if you're leaning in a good way, you can get to the bottom of it. If you're listening to respond, then it seems like you might get into positional bargaining where you've got your set of facts, or you've got your opinion, your claim, your assumptions, they've got theirs, and next thing you're just butting heads with the person.
Yeah. I mean, the other version of that is that people could be afraid that by listening to understand that they're going to affirm that person's position, right? They let them say something, they don't respond to it immediately, and then through silence, they've sort of acquiesced to whatever it is that person has said.
Yeah.
But in truth, what we want to, if we're going to be charitable and we're going to get to the ends that we're really after, then it does us no good to simply say, well, you're wrong and here's what's right, and be done with it.
Yeah.
They've reached that conclusion for a reason, whether it be logical or emotional or pragmatic, right? There are reasons that people got to where they got. If you want to get to where you want to get with this person, you'd better understand them.
Right.
Because if you don't understand them, you're not going to get there. It's just going to be a fight, and people are going to, throw their hats down and walk away.
Yeah, they're going to leads to trench warfare. We just back into our own corners and just start lobbing bombs at each other.
Right, and then it gets worse and worse, and we escalate and escalate until everything falls apart. Yeah. So instead, let's hear what it is. Let's understand it. Let's process it with them. Let's ask good questions, right? Yeah. And we'll get to and look, we might be wrong. Right? Yeah. It could be that their assumption is one we hadn't considered.
Right.
And if that's the truth, aren't we better knowing it?
Yeah. And maybe to your point, maybe that's sometimes why we avoid these objections is we don't want to go down a path where we actually have to admit to ourselves that maybe there is something there. Maybe our assumptions have gotten in the way of a good claim or a reasonable argument that the other side is making.
Yeah, because we don't want to cede ground. But if that's the truth, ceding ground might be the fastest and best way to get to a reasonable middle ground with this person rather than holding the line. Yeah. Because if you're holding the line, they're going to hold the line. And if they're right, even if they only believe they're right, but especially if they're actually right, then we're really in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of right, it's the right time for us to take a break. So we will be right back after these messages.
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Infinity. Guarantee Rate Infinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
And welcome back. We're here with Jacob Feldman. And my next question for you, Jake, is what's the difference between anticipating based on facts versus anticipating based on assumptions when it comes to anticipating these objections?
It's interesting because there are shared facts and then there are presented facts, right? So there are facts that we're all aware of, right? We can look to the past and even look to sort of the immediate past or the present and say, these are things that we all know are true. Right? In the world of real estate. This is the trend in rents or in sales prices for condos or co-ops in a certain neighborhood or what. But like we can all look at that data and know that that data is true. We can look at past sales prices of this apartment or in this building and know that those things are true. And so in that way, we're dealing in empirical data, and we can look at that data and say, okay, I know the conclusion that I've drawn based on that. What are other versions of conclusions based on this data, right? What else could somebody decide is true? Were I the buyer's agent, what would I say in this situation? That's a pretty straightforward way of thinking. But the other version of facts and assumptions has to do with the present and the future. Right? And that has to do with making predictions or analyses of the future, which leaves us in the great unknown, right? We can't know what's going to happen in the future. So then we have a much larger gulf to get over, which is what are the ways that the person on the other side of this table is going to tell me the world is going to work out so that I can, and so that, they can get their ends. And that we get into the infinite possibilities of the outcomes of an argument. These are infinite possibilities. We have no idea what those people are going to get to. We don't know what their objectives are. So our best bet is, rather than coming up with a myriad assumptions, a huge long laundry list of possible things that they could say to us, we want to gather data about that person so that we can figure out what their objectives are. Because if we don't have an end goal, how do we know how they're going to leap, right? We need to know where they're trying to get to.
Right.
Once we know where they're trying to get to, this takes us back to what we were talking about before. Then we can at least frame the gap for ourselves. Because of this information that we know, how are they going to get to this claim that they are going to make? And that claim is going to be based on their objectives, right? Do they want a lower price? Do they want concessions on sale? Do they want... you tell me the things that buyers want or that sellers want, right? But whatever are the things that they are going to want out of this, if we can find that out, then we can, verbalize that gap for ourselves. They've assumed that these things mean that thing, and they've overlooked the possibility that they don't. And if they've overlooked the possibility that they don't, how can I present new facts, new information in order to lead them down this alternate path?
Right. Right. So if I'm looking at this like a map, if we can understand where it is that we believe they're going, or ask enough questions to predict or to have a reasonable idea of where we believe they're going, then we can kind of see what the line is that they're taking to get there.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of addressing the path itself and the assumptions that they're making, so that we can kind of help them choose an alternate path or an alternate map.
You've seen Back to the Future too, right?
Yeah, I have.
So you remember when Doc turns over the chalkboard and he does the one timeline and then he has the alternate path timeline? So we need to figure out, okay, they believe that they're in the current 1985, but we want them to go to this alternate 1985. And if we want that, we have to figure out where the point of deviation is, right? What new fact can I introduce into the timeline to make them deviate and make them end up at this new place?
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
I love the reference to Back to the Future too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Have you shown your kids the Back to the Future trilogy?
No, we have not. You have?
My kids love the Back to the Future trilogy.
Yeah, we have not gone there.
They liked 1 better than 2 and 3. Oh, no, they liked 3 a lot. They didn't really like 2.
That's the cowboy one, right?
Yeah, I like the cowboy one.
All right, well,
That's really good.
All right, well, that is definitely a tangent.
Yeah,
So let's get back on track. We're going to pivot to language and spotting the cues. Spotting the cues using logical reasoning in an effort to break down common verbal patterns that reveal the assumptions behind objections. So, yeah, we're getting deep here. So, how do we test whether a hard never or always is fact-based or assumption-based?
It's never fact-based.
Okay.
Always and never are ridiculous, right? There's no such thing. But those are examples of the kinds of language that we need to look out for.
Great.
The language we're looking for is when somebody applies adjectives and adverbs to what they're doing, right? It's not this thing is true. It's that this thing is certainly true. This thing is obviously true.
Yeah.
Once they start to lay that adverb on top of it, and you say, oh, that person is trying to convince me of this thing, rather than simply stating fact, right? So if we can keep our ear out, let's say ear, right? We keep our ear out for those modal adverbs, right? Those things that sort of give us the sense that somebody is stating opinion, has reached a conclusion, has analyzed the facts in front of them, and is presenting it to us in a way meant to convince, right? Persuasive language. That's the language we look for. Okay, that's their claim that reveals that there's an assumption between the facts and what they're claiming, because they wouldn't need to say it's certainly true if there were a full-on connection between where they got, right? It would just be conditionally true.
I said this last time on the podcast that's gold. Like, if there's any takeaway from this podcast for real estate professionals who, you know, that we run into this constantly, not only with clients, with other agents, with influencers in the industry that are always layering on that level of obvious, certain, that's an always or a never. And that idea that should be your verbal cue or that language cue for you to go, they're trying to convince me of something. This is not an objective fact.
Yeah.
This is them trying to make it seem like an objective fact. I should probably ask some more questions.
Yeah, I mean, we can go so much deeper on this, but there are things that will be conditionally true, right?
Sure.
We could construct some chain of ideas that lead you from a fact to another fact that is objectively and conditionally 100% true, no question about it, right? I've lived in Manhattan for this long, and this has been true in Manhattan for this long, therefore that's true about me, right? Like that can be true.
Sure.
But when you go from that to, and so certainly I need to continue living in Manhattan.
Right.
Why is that certain, right? You can almost think of it like we've gone from minutia, details, little bits and pieces, to suddenly we've parachuted into something broader, right?
Yeah.
When we start to generalize and we come out of those small points, those minor points, into something broader, where we generalize or we prescribe something for ourselves. This is what I should do in the future, or what I should have done in the past. That's all. So we've got our adverbs and we've got our shoulds and coulds and woulds, right?
Those modal verbs.
Yeah. So this idea of prescriptive language or conditional language, right? Those are the ones that will really tell you that person is trying to lead us through a leap in logic and trying to gloss over it for us.
Right.
And either by force of will or by fast talking, right? And I hate to call out the salespeople in the room. This is how salespeople make their living. This is how you do it, right? You buffalo people.
That's right.
You push them into corners, and you bulldoze them, and you've talked so fast and so convincingly and with such a big smile that they believe you. Right. But for people on the other side, the people to whom they are selling, keep your eyes out for that kind of language. Anybody who's ever been in a car dealership knows this is how the salespeople get through it, right? They're going to tell you facts that are true about the car, and then they're going to tell you why. So this is what's good about this for your family. Right. Whoa. Tell me facts. Let me draw my own conclusions.
Yes, and for the people watching this podcast, those agents that we are influencing to do things differently than your typical salesperson, there is a way for you to have a conversation with a client where you don't have to fall into that trap of trying to convince your client that something is objectively true, as opposed to, just like we've been talking about for the last 20 plus minutes, understanding your client, hearing your client, and then dealing with whatever assumptions they're making, claims they're making, and having a conversation with them to get to what is the best answer for them, the thing that serves their interests.
And so here's the great challenge to the people watching and listening to this podcast, which is the next time you're in one of these situations with your client, challenge yourself never to tell them your opinion. Don't tell them. Ask questions, provide facts, and let them draw their own conclusions. And if you have to put up guardrails, but let them get there on their own. And you're going to see it may take a little longer. It may take a little more work, but it will last so much longer. It will be so much more substantive than the, here's what you should do. No, that's wrong. Here's what you should do. That doesn't work. And if it works in the short term, it won't work in the long term. Those people will go somewhere else. They'll hear another person tell them something different, and they'll be gone.
Yeah, and going back to your car dealership example, if anybody has ever met that honest, that skilled salesperson, skilled negotiator that sells them a car, and you have that experience that transforms the way you feel about your typical car salesperson, you'll never go anywhere else.
Of course.
You'll continue to buy Toyotas just because that's the kind of car they're selling. If they end up selling BMWs, your next car is going to be a BMW, and you'll never leave that salesperson because of the way they made you feel, because of the way that they listened to you and heard you, and so there's that long-term relationship to be created by doing things a little bit differently.
Well, I mean, this is how I've made my career as an educator, right? Because in the end, I'm not doing homework for people. I'm not giving them the shortcuts to the answers or the high scores. I'm teaching them things that are substantive and are supportive and are long-term. And then they keep coming back and they say, oh, do you teach this? And oh, do you teach that? And let me recommend you to my friend. Not because, I fancy myself a good teacher, but I think also there's a sense that I'm not being imposed upon. I'm not being pushed into things. I'm not being I'm really being supported wholly. And so you, as a salesperson and as somebody who's trying to build professional relationships, the best thing you can do for a client is make them feel empowered, right? It's just as you would do as a therapist,
That's
right?
so true.
Therapists don't make you feel bad for the way that you're feeling. They make you feel good about the fact that the way you're feeling is legitimate. And then they help you to figure out what to do with it.
You have choice. You have agency, and you have possibilities beyond where you are right now.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So we are going to exercise our empowerment and take a break.
Ultimate Diamond is New York City's most established family-owned jeweler. With over 65 years of experience, Ultimate is renowned for its exceptional, custom-crafted diamond jewelry, its bespoke engagement ring designs, and its ability to source rare, distinguished timepieces. Ultimate has built a legacy of timeless craftsmanship and discretion, making it a trusted name among those who value refined luxury. Learn more at ultimatediamond.com.
When we first started Excel Real Property Management 11 years ago, we did so with the intention of protecting the investment community. Here at XL Real Property Management, we focus specifically on serving the needs of individual apartments, townhouse, and small multifamily building owners both in Manhattan and select neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Our services encompass everything: rent collection, expense payment, handling maintenance and repair, turnover between tenants, insurance needs. Literally anything that an investor would typically handle him or herself, we take care of for them. Whether you hold one individual apartment or a rental building that houses 20 units, XL is here to help with all of your specific needs.
Hi, I'm Evan Greenberg with Langdon Title. I specialize in title insurance across New York, helping real estate attorneys, agents, and brokers close with confidence. I solve problems fast and keep your deals moving. Contact me anytime.
All right, and we are back. Now, another common frustration any negotiator has is when clients or counterparts make what the negotiator feels are irrational decisions, or decisions that run against their own self-interest, or sometimes in spite of their self-interest. Now, this could be because of a faulty conclusion, but it also could be because emotion often plays a large role in our decisions. So, how should we understand the importance of emotion in decision-making, and how emotion will often override all of the logic and data we collect and analyze?
It's a great question. Not that I'm not suited to answer. That's a question for the psychologists in the room. But I will say
we don't have any of those.
No. Certainly not. I will say there are times, and probably more often than we give ourselves credit for, that we are, if not irrational, at least irrational, right? Without intellect in making decisions. And we do base our decisions on emotional responses. But those emotional responses are rooted in internal assumptions that we can't voice, that we don't have full or complete or maybe any knowledge of, and that we're struggling to verbalize. Mm-hmm. And so instead of being able to verbalize them, if we can't access them in that way, instead we'll sort of I forget what the buzzword of the day is for this, but sort of cluster all those things. We'll clump all of those, all of that reasoning together into sort of a core emotional response, whether it's one that is fear-based, whether it's one that is anxiety-based, whether it's one that is anger-based. But that's how we'll respond. And if we are emotionally driven people, that's what we do. So if you're on the other side of the table from that, it does you no good to tell that person, well, stop being emotional, right? Just get down to brass tacks. Tell me the details. Well, if they could, they would have, right? The problem is they don't know why they're reacting that way. And they can't shut it off, right? They're not going to shut it off. I have had students who have sat in my office. One that I remember really well. She got a score back that upset her, and she cried for 75 minutes, I think, of our 90-minute session. And there was nothing I could say. There was nothing I could do. She didn't understand why she was responding the way that she was. So we have to be present with, this is where the father in me shows up, right? We have to be present with that person. Tell me what you're feeling. Can you tell me about the feeling? Can you tell me, what does it bring up for you? Let's access that side of things rather than saying, no, shut it off. Let's get down to the rational intellectual side. Logic doesn't play any part in emotions. And there are going to be times when you're not going to be able to unpack it, especially if the relationship is professional and limited. You're not going to get a client to tell you why it is that they have an emotional no to moving to, Maspeth, Queens. Right? They don't know. They can't articulate it. That's okay. It's fine. So we say, okay, we're gonna absorb that into the mix. It's gonna be part of our general mix of decisions, and we'll keep talking about it. And if you can tell me at some point, great. Otherwise, we're gonna roll with it. You're not gonna be able to fight emotions with logic. It's not gonna work.
Yeah, I think it's so well said. And the fact that, going back to the example with your student, the emotion itself is absolutely rational and logical. I mean, the fact that people respond physically or psychologically to something that happens to them is absolutely it's that in and of itself is rational. But to cause someone to believe or to challenge someone in believing that reaction is somehow clouding their judgment in a way that's harmful to them, as opposed to just being a process of what they need to go through right now in order to get to the other side of that. It's not, like you said, it's not going to do you any good to take on that challenge, or to fight someone with your own emotion. Because I think oftentimes what ends up happening is when we see someone whose emotions may be clouding their judgment or may be clouding logic and reasoning, we get emotional and we end up challenging them, like by using a word like, "Oh, you're so triggered right now." Well, when you start using a word like that, you yourself have been triggered. Yeah, you yourself are acting emotionally in response to them. Right. And that can get really, really dicey.
Yeah. And as a teacher, I will say my advice to those who are in that position, if you've got clients who are under duress, right? They're in a difficult part of their lives. They're having to make decisions that, that they would love to have more space with, but they don't have it. The best thing you can do is be empathetic and say, you know what? I see that you're having this reaction. I'm happy to have this conversation with you if you want, and you tell me what you're feeling and what's making you feel that way, and we'll just sit with that for a while. And and what that's going to do is that's going to bring them closer to you. That's going to make them trust you more. And another day they'll come back to you and they'll say, I don't really know what's making me feel that way, but I know that I do, and I can have a logical conversation about the rest of it, but this part of it I can't. But we can't react emotionally. We can't be cold. We can't step away, right? All of those are not in our self-interest as the person on the other side of the relationship.
Yeah, if gaining trust is the goal,
it has to be.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Then you've got to see that as your goal and act accordingly. Yeah. If you're there to build trust, which is going to allow the other side, the other person, your counterpart or your client to open up, then that should guide you.
Well, I'll give you a simple anecdote. I think I mentioned this to you last night. In the decision process for people going off to college or university, oftentimes they ask me, how do you know which one is the right one for you? Mm-hmm. Because I've got a list of 100 colleges and universities and all of their different statistics and all of the different outcomes, and they all kind of feel the same and they all kind of look the same, and what do you do? And so I tell them the story about my decision process. And I had a list of schools to choose from. I didn't get in everywhere, but I got into a lot of places, and I had gone to visit, and in the end, everything on paper looked great. And so I had to go on campus and say, what does this feel like to me?
Yeah.
Could I articulate it in the moment? No. But I went on to, I'm not going to name names, but I went on to one urban campus university, very well regarded internationally, and it was supposed to be my top choice.
Yeah.
And I didn't love it. And I couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
And then I went to an analog, to another major city-based university, urban university, internationally renowned. And I got there and I said, this is for me. This is the one. I don't know why. It feels right to me. It's got, to use the crunchy words of the day. If, anybody who's living in LA will appreciate this. The vibration was right. The energy was right.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And now here I am 30 years later, 30 years, Jesus, 30 years later, 30 years later, I can look back at me in 17 and I can say, yeah, I know what was going on for me. I know what I was seeing, because now I can look back and say, all of these things that I've sought over the course of my life, they were represented in that one moment.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was abstract. It was unsayable. It was sort of unknowable, except to say that it felt right. The energy was right. And so, if you're a real estate agent and you've got a client who says, this apartment feels wrong, I don't know why. The price is right. The size is right. The neighborhood's good. But there's something about it that's wrong. You got to listen to them.
Yeah.
And you might not be able to extract from that something tangible. It may have to stay emotional or abstract or whatever. But that's okay. You do your best, right? You say, okay, well, let's gather more data. Let's go to more apartments.
Yeah.
Let's try to figure it out. And if we can't, at some point, you're going to walk into one, as I did to my current apartment, and you're going to walk in and you're not going to know why, but this one feels right.
And you mentioned last night we were talking about this, that you had your spreadsheets and you had all of the you had all the data laid out in front of you physically, where you're like, okay, and you're looking at all of that, trying to make your decision. And we see this with clients as well. We're sending them listings. They're sending us listings. They're outright rejecting a listing before they've even looked at a photo or a price or whatever, but it doesn't feel right on paper. But to your point, once you're in it, once you need to experience it to determine whether something feels right or feels wrong. And sometimes it just doesn't feel right. And sometimes the thing that you didn't know was going to feel right, there's just something about it that makes sense to you.
That's right. I mean, there's a certain sense that these opportunities and these decisions are, they're arbitrary to a certain degree, right?
Right.
You can't know for sure. There's nothing that's going to be conditionally true about this is the right apartment for me. And this is true across our whole lives, right? Should I get married, right? Should I have a baby? Should I buy this apartment? Should I take this job? These are questions you can't predict. We're talking about predictions, right?
Yeah.
You have to build in a whole lot of assumptions. And some of those assumptions are going to be intellectual. Some of them are going to be emotional. And you can't know them and you can't predict them and you can't lay them all out. So you just kind of have to do it. I heard a great podcast the other day. A brilliant
Was it this
woman.
one?
It was not this one. I mean, I did hear them, but it wasn't this one. But I was listening to a great podcast in the car the other day, and this woman was talking about the struggle with decision making, the anxiety around decision making. And sometimes it has to boil down to, I'm going to count down from 5, and then I'm just going to do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go.
Yeah.
And so if you allow your clients to have that portion of the mix of the algorithm in terms of choosing an apartment, choosing a city to move to, whatever it is, that has to be part of the mix, and that's okay.
Well, that's a perfect way to transition out of the deep questions, because you've answered some really good deep ones. Now we're going to go into the lightning round, where we get to get your thoughts on some more lighthearted questions. So let's start with our theme music. Ooh.
Oh, sorry.
I like that.
Electric
the guitar. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The lightning round. So,
right.
Jake,
Yes.
You've been part of the lightning round before.
I have.
Some amazing responses on cuisine in Jackson Heights and Daniel LaRusso and the Karate Kid and your favorite music note. I wish I could ask that question again, but I'm not. I'm not going to ask you your second favorite.
I don't have a second
music. Oh, good. So I have some good ones, though, I think.
Okay.
I think. So you ready?
Yeah.
All right. What's the last totally mundane thing you overanalyzed using logical reasoning?
So it's interesting. It's actually about food. So
Surprise.
Yeah, exactly. You're only New Yorkers will understand this, but you're sitting in your apartment. It's 6:30. Nobody's thought about dinner, right? And then it's, how do I negotiate myself from the position I'm in right now, where it's 6:30 and I'm on the couch and I'm deeply hungry, to feeding everybody where everybody's happy. How do I navigate this path? And so, how do I convince everybody else to do the thing for dinner that I want to do? And I got there last night. I was really. We ordered Thai food. It was great.
It was fantastic.
It was
I was actually telling Ray about it. It was very good.
It was delicious.
Yeah,
that's right. So I got there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. That was kind of mundane.
You
didn't have to work very hard.
I'm not pulling back the curtain, though. You don't get to see the man behind Oz.
Yeah. Whatever it is, you did it extremely well.
I got there.
I think it was, hey, Eric, you want Thai food? Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, but you weren't the only player, right? I had to convince my wife. I had to convince the kids. We got everybody.
All right. I'll take it. All right. This one you'll love. Okay, so I know you and your wife love the Marvel Universe.
We do.
All right. So the leader of the Avengers, Captain America or Iron Man?
Okay. So we've been talking about intellectual versus emotional all day, right? The emotional leader, the person you want to get behind is Cap, right? Everybody wants Cap at the front and everybody's behind. But the person driving the bus, the person actually doing all of the machinations to make everything happen, that's Tony. I mean, Tony orchestrated the entire thing. And,
yeah.
I mean, though in truth, God, I mean, we could spend hours on. In fact, what you should do is you should get my wife in this chair and just have an hour on the Marvel. An hour on the Marvel.
She's pretty spectacular herself. She would be
spectacular.
great in that chair.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. But for now, I will say Cap is the emotional leader. He's the figurehead, as he should be.
Do you gravitate toward emotional leaders in your life?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, despite my professional pursuits, I'm actually a very sort of I lean on the emotion-based side of decision making. And put me in front of a Disney movie, I'm weeping.
I know.
So that's interesting. I mean, in a certain sense, right? Like I need to see somebody feeling what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I don't like people that are cold and corporate as decision makers in front of me. It's hard to believe. It's hard to feel like they are authentic in what they're doing and accomplishing. Yeah. I want somebody that feels inspiring a little bit.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
totally with you. Good answer.
Thanks.
All right. I kind of know what the answer to this question is, but I'm going to ask it because I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
More data always means better decision making. Is that true or false?
Oh, better decision making. No. More data is good for certain things. Obviously, it has to be good data, right? It can't be bad data. If it's bad data, then we're clouding the field. But if we have good data, it's collected well. It represents the full swath. Obviously, that leads to more sort of probable outcomes, and then you have to sort of tie it together with a story, a narrative about how you would get there. But like I said, decision-making is not only data-based.
Right.
It just isn't. We've got our lizard brains. Our lizard brains are part of us. Mm-hmm. And we have to serve them. Like they need to feel happy. And happiness is not just about collecting data. Happiness is about how you experience the world. And so if you're not experiencing the data well, it does nothing for you.
Wow. I like it. Okay, good one.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that might be now my new favorite lightning round question. All right, last one. I know you're gonna love this, just like you love the musical note question.
Yes.
What is your favorite theorem, and why?
All right. Are we talking math? Are we talking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Let's. Okay. Well, I'll let you decide.
No. Okay. I'm going to give you one theorem and one paradox.
All right. Good.
All right. Theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is beautiful. It really is beautiful. It can be demonstrated visually. I don't know if you've ever been to the Science Museum out in Queens. The Hall
of Science.
So in the Hall of Science, there's this station up in the top. They have this sort of old exhibit that's been around for 50 years, 60 years. And there was a version of it there and a version of it at the Boston Science Museum, which is where I first saw it. And one of the stations there, they have this triangle that has 3 squares on each of the 3 sides of this right triangle, where if you turn it one way, the big square is filled with liquid. And then you turn it over, and the 2 little squares are filled with liquid. And it's like a visual representation of the Pythagorean theorem. It's amazing. But I also sort of think about Pythagoras when he was coming up with this thing, like sitting there with a stone and a little chisel and just like drawing triangles over and over and over again for years and years and years trying to come up with this thing. I love that idea. So that's that. On the paradox side, the one that I love because it's got sort of a philosophical tie to it is something called Zeno's paradox. Have you ever heard of this? So I'm sure you've heard of the situation. Zeno's paradox is you are standing 20 feet from the door. And you're going to walk halfway to the door. And then you're going to walk halfway to the door again.
Right.
And then you're going to walk halfway to the door again. And so over and over again, you're cutting the distance between you and the door in half, which means you never get there. You never get there. And so this has to do with what we were talking about, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you move. At some point, you move the goal. Well, it's not the goalpost, but you move yourself toward the goalpost halfway every time. And you feel like you're making progress. But at some point, you just have to reach out and touch the door.
Right.
Right. And so in a decision-making standpoint, you're the client, right? You're the one trying to make this decision about, whatever it is that you're buying or renting. They're going to get halfway over and over and over again. And they're going to get closer and closer and closer. And maybe your job as their real estate professional is to just remind them, hey, you're pretty close to that door at this point.
Right. And going back to that Simon Sinek quote, like sometimes, you have to just, it's the focusing on the obstacle that is between you and your decision, or you and the thing that you want. Sometimes you need to remove that obstacle. If that obstacle is the half, or that space of that half each time, sometimes that's just it. You need to remove it.
I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I don't know. I'm not sure. You're never going to be sure. You're never going to be all the way to the door. It's never going to, I mean, this is like, life decisions, getting married, having kids, buying houses, right? You're never sure, but are you close enough to touch the door? And if you are, maybe it's time to just reach out and take the handle and open
literally
it up.
And figuratively.
And there you go.
All right, Jake, thank you again. I loved having you back for a second time. I'm sure there will be a third, but in the meantime, tell our listeners and viewers how they can find you, where they can find you, remind them of the LR breakdown and all the things that you're doing.
So you can find me at nexusacademics.com. That's my tutoring website. If you're interested in law school or the LSAT, you can find me at triplereview.online. Also on Facebook and Discord and Reddit. Under both of those handles, you'll find me there. And then we have our podcast, which is available on Spotify and Apple Music and all of the other podcasting platforms, called the LR Breakdown, with my partner Keith Sisko, where we talk about logical reasoning, and we have great special guests, including me as Eirik as me. But we talk about how to break down the logic of reasoning and get into some pretty deep and compelling ideas along the way.
I mentioned this last podcast, but if you didn't see first of all, if you didn't see the first podcast that Jake was on about logical reasoning, you've got to go back and it's phenomenal. But I, in preparation for that first podcast, listened to several episodes and still now continue to listen to episodes of LR Breakdown, because, as I mentioned before, I'm not sure if anybody else could take 5 questions off the LSAT and review them on a podcast and make it seem interesting like you and Keith do. It's really, it's fantastic. So, all right, make sure to check out Jake's podcast. And there's several things that I'm taking away from this podcast, but if there's one thing I'll mention, it's that objections aren't random. They leave a trail. The best negotiators train themselves to spot the cues, questions, and assumptions, and test logic before the objection even lands on the table. But logic alone is not enough. You've got to navigate the emotions, biases, and yes, the occasional irrational choice if you want to guide your client toward the outcome that best serves their interests and their goals. Because at the end of the day, it's not our job to win an argument or convince people of things. It's to help people make the best possible decisions with the facts in front of them and the future that they want in mind. So that is the Shear Line for this week, everybody. As a reminder, you can support and follow us by subscribing, rating, and reviewing the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to getmorenetwork.com, where you can check out all of the amazing shows on the More Network, including past episodes of the Shear Line with Jake and with my kids. You'll find me all over Instagram at archway.partners, as well as on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Eirik the Expert. You can contact the Excelsior team at BHS by going to bhsusa.com, and you can connect with my company, Archway Partners Coaching, by visiting archwaypartnersinc.com, where you can find out more about the incredible new Mighty Network that we just launched. It's an incredible community full of all kinds of resources, courses, modules, scripts, and videos. It's fantastic. Go check it out by going to archwaypartnersinc.com. And remember, there is a key for every lock, but it's the right combination of grooves, cuts, and teeth that lift the pins and create the shear line. Until next time, keep turning curiosity into connection, mystery into mastery, and keep unlocking what's possible. See you next time, everybody.